Skinny, awkward, and introverted. Everyone described him as a typical nerd, incapable of violence, until a man is brutally murdered and all evidence is pointing at the baby-faced boy. How could everyone have been so wrong about him? This is the case of the baby-faced boy who violated and killed a man for thrills. Morgan Huxley was described as a ladies' man, tall, good-looking, and charming. Born in 1982 in Sydney, Australia, he was the youngest of 3 children of Dee and Alan Huxley. Morgan's friends described him as the life of the party. He was funny, outgoing, and people just seemed to gravitate towards him, both men and women. He was pretty close to his family, loved animals, and enjoyed playing soccer. He studied marine engineering in school and started his own business, Huxley Marines. When this incident happened, Morgan was 31 years old and living in a 2-bedroom townhouse apartment with his roommate, Jean Redmond, a 24-year-old physiotherapist from Ireland. On September 8, 2013, at around 1 a.m., Morgan, who had been out celebrating his best friend's engagement party, walked into Oaks Hotel to grab one last drink before heading home. He was barefoot, having left his sandals at the party. He had first dropped by the ATM across the street to get some cash, and was now enjoying his drink alone at the bar. About half an hour later, Morgan was told that the bar was closing, and so he finished up his beer and left. He was captured on CCTV, walking down the street, heading to his apartment. That would be the last time he would be seen alive again. Morgan's apartment was just a short distance away, and so he was there within a few minutes. He went to his room, opened the window, and collapsed on his bed, falling deep asleep, unaware of the danger that lurked outside. His roommate Jean, who was sleeping in the next bedroom, heard Morgan enter his room and got up and locked hers. She then put on her earphones and went back to sleep. She had only slept for about 15 minutes when she was startled awake by a loud knocking at the front door. Who could that be? Her boyfriend, who was working one of the night shifts, had his own key and would not be home for another hour. Maybe it's one of Morgan's friends, she thought, and she drifted back to sleep. At 3 a.m., Jean was roused from sleep again by a commotion coming from Morgan's room. Something was not right. She got up to check on him and was completely horrified by what she found. Morgan was lying on the floor, bleeding profusely. He had multiple wounds, including the 3 huge holes in his neck. He was naked from the waist down, wearing nothing but a t-shirt. Jean started screaming and shouting his name, trying to see if he was breathing. She then rushed back to her room to call the emergency services. The paramedics arrived at around 3:05 and found that Morgan had gone into cardiac arrest. They tried resuscitating him as they rushed to the hospital. Sadly, no one could save him, and Morgan died soon after. He had suffered a total of 28 impaling wounds, 3 of which were large and deep wounds on the same side of his neck, while the rest were small slash wounds to his back. The news of Morgan's death and how he died shocked the entire community. Morgan's family and friends were completely devastated, as they could not understand why anyone would want to hurt him. Morgan was well liked in the community, so who could have done this, and why? An investigation was immediately launched, with investigators going through phone records and surveillance footage, as well as trying to find the murder weapon. Since there was no sign of a break-in at the apartment, investigators thought that the killer was probably someone that Morgan knew and let inside the house. They looked into Morgan's ex-girlfriends, especially one who had allegedly been so obsessed with him that she would show up at his apartment uninvited when he was not around. Could she have done it out of jealousy? There was also Morgan's landlord, who had leased him his business premises. The two had reportedly had a heated argument a few days before. Could he have killed Morgan out of revenge? While going through surveillance footage, investigators noticed a figure walking behind Morgan as he was going home from the bar. The figure, which appeared to be a young boy in his late teens or early 20s, was even jogging at some point, as if to try to catch up with him. The boy was carrying a blue bag slung across his chest, and wearing a black long-sleeved shirt, black shoes, and checkered chef's pants. Although the CCTV footage did show the boy walking behind Morgan, it wasn't clear whether he was indeed following him or was just going his way. Still, investigators wanted to talk to him in case he might know something that could help in the case. The police started asking around in restaurants and hotels around the area to see if anyone might recognize the boy, and someone did. He was identified as 20-year-old Daniel Jack KELSALL, a kitchen assistant at Sydney Cooking School, which was just opposite the Oaks. Adopted at birth, Daniel had a pretty comfortable childhood growing up, with loving and supportive parents. He seemed like a normal boy, but there was something else. Something dark that nobody saw. On September 24th, Daniel was brought in for questioning, and he seemed calm and collected as he told investigators his version of events on the night Morgan was killed. He said that he finished his shift around midnight and went to a nearby convenience store to buy some drinks. There, he met Morgan, who had come to use the ATM machine.
I then had a small conversation. To this guy, Morgan?
Yes, Morgan, yes.
Morgan asked me if I wanted to use the money, the ATM.
He asked you,
He
sorry.
asked me. I replied no and then left.
Daniel had noticed Morgan's bare feet and even nicknamed him No Shoes. He said that he saw Morgan again at a street light as he was going home and smiled at him, but they never talked. Daniel also denied that he had ever met Morgan before this encounter.
Called him No Shoes.
No, not to his face. No, that's what.
Sorry, but that's what you said
The
to
name
us.
that I had for the person
Correct.
was, No Shoes.
No Shoes. Have you ever seen him before?
No.
Never?
Not to my knowledge.
Sorry?
Not to my knowledge, no.
When investigators showed him the CCTV footage and asked why he was running behind Morgan, he answered that his mom tells him to jog when he's feeling cold. Although investigators found Daniel to be a bit weird, they had no reason not to believe him, so they let him go. But before he left, they asked if he could provide his DNA samples as a part of the procedure. Daniel was quiet for a while, then said, no, he's not comfortable doing that. That was totally suspicious to the investigator, who concluded that Daniel was definitely hiding something. Later that day, when Daniel was at work, he said something really weird to his boss. His boss had asked him whether he murdered Morgan, and Daniel was like, no, I definitely didn't do it. But if I did do it, there's no way they'd catch me. Creepy, right? In the documentary series Crimes That Shook Australia, Daniel's boss said that he would never have imagined Daniel capable of murder of any kind.
When I found out that Daniel was a suspect, it was more total shock. I was like in total disbelief. There's no way this weedy little guy was capable of murder. He'd never shown even the slightest bit of aggression or even anger or grumpiness or anything.
2 days after the interview, the investigators received a strange call from Daniel telling them that he may have lied during his interview when he said that he hadn't spoken to Morgan that night. He claimed that when they met at the stoplight, Morgan had allegedly told him how stressed he was at work and that Daniel offered to cheer him up. So the two allegedly went to Morgan's apartment where they hooked up. Later, as he was leaving, Daniel claimed that he saw a blonde woman walking toward Morgan's apartment. Daniel even broke down in tears as he recounted his story to the investigator, saying, "She saw me coming out, and I think that's why he got murdered." When asked why he hadn't mentioned this before, he reportedly answered, "I was scared." Investigators found this information to be quite interesting because, first, everyone who knew Morgan said he was straight, so why would he be hooking up with a guy? Also, it seemed a little too convenient that the moment investigators asked for his DNA, Daniel would come up with a story about being intimate with Morgan, probably to explain why his DNA would be in Morgan's body. During this interrogation, investigators noticed a dark stain on Daniel's shoulder bag, and when they asked him about it, he claimed that it was a food stain, but when it was later examined, it turned out to be blood. Morgan's blood. Daniel's DNA was also found on Morgan's private parts, and his fingerprints were identified as the same ones found on Morgan's bedroom door. But it gets worse. Daniel's psychiatrist told investigators that about a year ago, Daniel had confided in her about having intrusive thoughts of killing someone with a knife on his way home at night. He repeated the same thing to another psychiatrist, saying that he had thought of taking someone's life for the thrill of it. He went on to say, "Going to jail would depend on whether I wanted to get caught. It would probably be a total random with a knife. I could hide the body." With all this evidence, investigators were able to piece together the chilling truth about what really happened that night. When Daniel saw Morgan that night, he knew that he was the perfect victim for his sick and twisted fantasy, so he followed him home. He watched Morgan get inside his apartment and then waited about 15 minutes before knocking on the door. When no one answered, he tried the door handle and found that Morgan had forgotten to lock it. So he let himself in and crept up the stairs to find a 2-bedroom next to each other. The first door was locked, but the other one was slightly opened, and Morgan was sleeping soundly on his bed. This is exactly what he had been hoping for. He started to violate Morgan, who jolted awake, confused about what was going on. But Daniel did not give him a chance and plunged a knife into his neck and back. Morgan tried to fight back, but the knife wounded his arms and shoulders. By the time Daniel was done, Morgan was lying in a puddle of his own blood. Daniel then left the house, taking along Morgan's phone and the knife. The 2 items were never recovered, and that's not even the end of it. As it would emerge, Morgan was actually not the first nor the last man that Daniel had stalked. One man told the police that 2 months before the murder, he was having a cigarette outside his home when Daniel jumped at him from behind a bush. Another man said that a week after the killing of Morgan, a man who looked a lot like Daniel had followed him almost to his front door and then ran off when he was confronted. Daniel was arrested and charged with the murder of Morgan, but despite all the evidence against him, he pleaded not guilty and chose to go to trial. Throughout the trial, he actually seemed to be enjoying the attention and even tried to convince the jury that he had mental issues which made him do what he did. However, the jury saw right through him and he was guilty of murder and 1 count of indecent assault. He was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in prison. His psychiatrist would later say that she believes he would kill again if he ever gets out. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.